Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here and welcome you. I want to welcome you to this first meeting, this first webinar of this webinar series called Voices for Peace. This is a program that we are co-organizing amongst various organizations, the Club of Rome, the 50%, the Fifth Element, the Climate Youth Resilience, Greenpeace Africa, Roots, Soka Gakkai, Amnesty International, um, Desmond and Leah Legacy to Legacy Foundation, the Positive Peace Society. I believe I'm not leaving anyone outside. Um, so thank you very much for being here. These webinar series are going to work being hosted each one by one or two organizations that propose the speakers and the topic of the dialogue. So besides welcoming everyone who's outside of these organizations and are here to share, the idea is that we can have a trustful building and meaningful conversation around what peace actually is and how we can keep collaborating to foster peace everywhere in the world, which is so needed right now, especially with the news we're having every single day. So, um, thank you for being here, and I want to welcome also and give the floor to Paul Shrivastava, who's the co-president of the Club of Rome, also a teacher in a professor, sorry, in Penn State University, and wonderful Cathy-Mae Karelse, who's from the Climate Youth Resilience. So the dynamic is that the both speakers are going to share their presentations, speak a little bit about them, and then we'll go for comments and Q&As. So if there's anything that comes up to any of you while they're speaking, please feel free to share them in the chat box or to write them down so you don't forget until the very end. So thank you once again, and Paul, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Matthias, and good morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And I'm glad to see so many faces and people present in this conversation. And I'm sitting here wondering a little bit, why is it that I am the speaker? Because all the expertise on peace resides in you. You all represent the organization that are actively working towards peace. So I want to be more than just a little humble and acknowledge the amount of expertise and knowledge and the work and commitment that all of you represent. And I hope that even if I don't convey anything meaningful to you, I will learn from you. The other thing I notice is I'm probably the oldest person in the room. And peace is not going, oh, well, we can debate that, Mark. I'm on the wrong side of 75, so I'm staking a claim over here. But peace, in my view, is not something that we should be listening too much to the elders. That is something that to me is a particular domain in which youth have something to offer, because our view of peace comes from history. It comes from a legacy of 2000 years of war. Young people's view of peace comes from the future. It is where they want the world to go. And to me, that is a very enlightening place. So frankly, I think I'm going to get more out of this webinar than you are, but please excuse me. And bear with a few minutes of a few prepared slides. I don't have to use them and I'm not going to dwell on them, but I just want to set the tone about why I think we need to think about peace from a futurist perspective. Okay, let me share these slides if I can get, okay, here. Can you all see them? Okay. So I'm learning a lot about youth perspectives on peace from Matthias and the 50% work and the surveys that they have been doing and the engagement that they're doing with youth. And I find that young people are particularly concerned about peace and sustainability. They see it as an integral part of their futures. And they're very worried with the kind of stuff that has evolved in the last few decades now. I call this period of the last 70 years or so the Anthropocene, like many scientists, although it's a contested term. I think it captures a lot of the things that we are witnessing today, the kind of acceleration of population growth and consumption and extraction from the earth, and the risks that we are placing on planetary boundaries of life, and the economic inequalities we have created by a kind of extractive, consumerist, militarist economic system that is globally in place, and then the overall chaos that Mr. Donald Trump represents and has unleashed on the rest of the world. In this confusion and chaos, I think young people are trying to make sense and think about uh, what it means to live with this kind of dread, the generalized anxiety about violence, and the realization that peace is a kind of precondition for, for the future, a precondition that we need to insist on now. And in response to that youth perception or impulse, if you will, we at the Club of Rome have been articulating, and we are in the early stages of this articulation, this notion of planetary peace. That peace is not just about wars, but it is something that involves living life differently in a regenerative way so that we create more life rather than creating death through wars. So I will explain this concept a little bit more. And there are some documents out there that we have produced that we'll point you out to. But the main message I want to leave with you is peace is something that we want to engage in our daily lives, in the way we live, not as a thing that happens when nations come to war. So it's about our transformation. It's about systems transformation. It's about our economic, our educational, our social, our political, our cultural, our technological systems in which we can intervene on a day-to-day basis in our lives to promote peace, to reduce violence. And it is that which will bring this planetary peace together, not some bureaucrat sitting in the UN or the leadership in Washington and Paris and London. We are the ones that are going to have to eventually bring about peace. So, with that, let me say that the big challenge now is around what I'm calling existential risks. Many of you have heard that term. It's not a threat just to a particular nation or a particular group of people. It's a threat to humankind. And there are many types of existential risks that are being talked about in the press. And I just list at the bottom over here a whole list of them. It's become such a serious issue that the UN, the OECD, the International Interaction Council, which is former heads of state, have all established programs on dealing with these existential risks. And to me, these existential risks also represent an opportunity. And I don't want to dwell on the individual risks because we can get very bogged down and very depressed listening to all these existential risks. I want to focus on what is the solution over here. With every risk comes an opportunity, and here the opportunity is to rethink what it means to be human and redefine human existence, learning from life through the principles of regenesis and working towards an eco-civilization. So that is the mandate that we are establishing through this notion of planetary peace. We want to go beyond the traditional narratives of peace, of nation security and preventing war, towards a planetary peace vision that reduces mass violence, not only in national conflicts, but also in natural systems collapsing. We want to manage all impacts, not just trans-border impacts. Centers peace and regenesis in all systems. So it's about systems transformation for conflicts to be avoided and for eco-civilizations to emerge. So in our conception of this planetary peace, we focus on three themes. One is peace within self. I don't think you can talk about peace with others if you're not at peace with yourself. So there's a big portion of this piece which is about self-development and mindset development and worldview development. The second is peace with others. And by that, I don't mean just peace between nations, but literally all others that you encounter in your day-to-day life. We need to make a new kind of peace with everybody that we live with, and then finally, peace with nature. So it goes from, it's kind of a layering from our own minds to our neighborhoods, our communities, our others, onto nature. And then if you are a spiritually minded person, it is also inclusive of that unitive consciousness level of existence, which many religions and traditional wisdoms point towards. So this is a big picture of peace that we want to articulate, and we focus on these principles of regenerative living, which means we can't be just extracting out of nature. We need to find a way of giving back, regenerating nature so that it's a safe and a healthy place for all of us to live in. And the other principle is an eco-civilization, which is a kind of a North Star that we want to point towards, that there is a possibility of a different type of civilization than what we are currently engaged in the future. We want to take it in a way where humans are seen as an integral part of nature and vice versa, and we create a harmonic civilization for all. And then point out a few activities that we are doing to implement this idea of peace. And I want to invite your participation in these activities. First, there is a document that is a report to the Club of Rome written by 17 members of the club on what it means to have enduring peace in the Anthropocene. It's a report freely available on our website. I encourage you to read through it. We are working on a number of ongoing activities. All the work of the Club of Rome is really done in partnerships. And that is why in the conversation part of this meeting today, I want to emphasize, we want to identify partners amongst you that want to work on these projects and imagine some projects together with you so that we can increase. Right now, we are working with elders for disarmament, on exposing militarism and the military industrial media educational complex that keeps our minds and, in fact, our jobs very embedded in a militaristic economy. We are working with Kyung-hee University, Nagasaki and Hiroshima universities, and planning a symposium this November, but a larger conference on planetary peace in 2026, where I think the youth should be present and their voice should be prominently heard. We're working on a journal of peace and sustainability. Okay, so those are some of the activities now. And I will end by inviting all of you to consider helping us develop this pluriversal view of peace where regenerativity is at the center, but we also consider the role for science and rationality and technology for peace to happen in our daily lives. And 50% is not just a allied organization, it is very much a part of the Club of Rome, and we are going to make it even more prominent in our activities in coming months and years. So I'm very keen to support the work that Matthias has launched, but all of you are participating in. And I list over there a few people beyond me that you can also try to reach if you have ideas about instigating new activities around peace. With that, I'd hand it over to both Matthias and Cathy-Mae to perhaps make additional comments and then open it up to discussion. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Paul, very much. So we, well, Kathy May, The floor is yours. Thank you for your presentation, Paul. Just a reminder for everyone that Q&A and comments and feedback it's going to be after Cathy-Mae's presentation.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I just before I begin sharing slides, it would be good to echo some of your words around how fortunate we are to be in this partnership of at least 8 organizations who are co-creating this webinar series. So there is certainly momentum among us and the beginnings of a conversation which we look very forward to taking forward in terms of what this means practically. But I also want to lift up, Paul, your devotion in handing the wand over to young people whose paradigms are different to those of us who are older, who come at these issues differently, who develop ways of seeing and being that are a lot more intrinsic in the ways of young people navigating the world today. So I think the beginnings, this launch seminar is really about opening up to getting this conversation going at a much deeper level among the organizations and then certainly among young people. So people, where are my slides? Let me make sure that I'm sharing the right thing. Okay, I am so grateful to be here. Thank you so much, Matthias and Paul, for co-creating and setting up this start after the video. We are speaking about the voice of peace in this context of looking at what does planetary peace actually mean and how do we breathe life into this concept so that we move from language and words to something that is practical. And the things I want to pick up on from what you've contributed, Paul, is to speak about the fact that peace is actually a daily practice, that this is not something we're wanting other organizations or people to achieve or create on our behalf. This is very much something that is up to each of us in terms of how we are living and practicing peace on a daily basis. The wonderful Prentice Hemphill in podcast series speaks about the fact that this change that we are after, this fundamental change, is cellular and intimate, is collective as well as cultural, that we are in the in paying homage to Dr. Martin Luther King, that we are making love synonymous with justice. And so all of us understand the echoes of this in the world, that we're wanting to come together for something far greater. And then also to echo what you're speaking about, Paul, in terms of the SDGs, the policy and legislative change, that the meta crisis we are meeting at the moment is really pushing us back towards movement building. It's really about people on the ground being organized and practicing the collective power that we have together in terms of building movements. We are seeing, we have seen over decades, and we are seeing again the power of movements in changing the course of history. And the references are, of course, I'm South African, the liberation struggle and the fact that we achieved our first free elections in 1994. And of course, when Bayo Akomolafe says the times are urgent, let us slow down, it is not to deny the impact of the military-industrial complex, nor the extremes of the meta crisis, which, as you say, Paul, can feel existential and anxiety-provoking for many people, especially people of the global majority, where we're living close to the breadline. But the idea here is also to say, let us not become reactive and only live in relation to the powers that be in terms of the forces of power over and how we are manipulated in these systems. Let us take time to organize, to live from our hearts, to build the kind of peace that we are wanting to see in our world through our everyday relationships. And of course, we understand the importance of structural and systemic shifts. And the work that we're very interested in Climate Youth Resilience is this work of narrative shift. How do we amplify the work of the heart? How do we begin to bring the heart, the spiritual, the sacred, back into our movements? There is a lot of this that happens sometimes outside of movements. And so how do we build bridges whereby we are using this collective power that we have to again inspire the possibilities of awe and wonder? And somebody who leads in this work so well is Yuria Selidwen, who speaks about let us re-establish and remember. It's not so much about re-establishing. Let us remember this way in which we are nature. It's not simply that we are a part of nature. The materialist paradigm has alienated us so much that we think we are separate from one another. We often feel alienated from ourselves, and we certainly don't feel the connections that we naturally have with the living universe and the elemental world. And of course, it just takes the notion of the fact that we are breathing to remember that we are connected with the winds and the elements of the earth beneath our feet, to remember that we are connected to all lands. And the knowledge that, of course, the planet has been through these kinds of crises multiple times, and that actually it's really up to us to consider how we are going to navigate worlds, which is why, as you're saying, we rely so much on young people. How do we navigate worlds in order for humanity to remain part of the living universe? And so again, the change that we're looking for, the 50% does such incredible work around systems change for young people. And the change we're looking for is, again, what is it that we're practicing on a daily basis that actually cultivates and brings about more peace in our lives? The Othering and Belonging Institute are incredible in their work of speaking about the fact that we need to move way beyond inclusion, which often includes us in systems that are problematic, that we're actually needing spaces of belonging in which all of us are able to contribute new and different visions of the future, and sometimes bring what we are remembering of indigeneity back on board. And so there is, of course, so much to say about belonging without othering, so that we are aware that we are not repeating the cycles of split chasms, fissures, fractures in our societies, which is the culture that we've become so desensitized to in the world. Where are we othering, and how can we build bridges instead of repeating those cycles of harm? Dominant narratives, we know, are extremely powerful, and because they surround us in so many multiple ways, we tend to buy into and believe them unwittingly, even though we don't believe we do. So this work of actually diving in and understanding what we embody, not what we aspire to embodying, but what we are currently embodying, and to, in community, be able to compost those areas where we ourselves are causing friction. You know, I recently had the beautiful privilege of being in a room with Sicelo Mbata from South Africa, who is a wilderness walker. He He leads people through the wilderness. And he grew up with a parent as a game ranger, and so grew up knowing this way of nature. And he says, you know, when we enter the wilderness, there is a very quick reminder that the human is not at the top of any chain. We have to enter with peace and with absolute humility. We have to arm ourselves with peace rather than guns. And we see this as well in the many ways in which genocidal wars and ongoing wars continue to break and disrupt our commitment, our practice of peace collectively. And so the issues for us become, where are we stretching and where are we learning? And can we become ongoing learners so that we are always intrigued by awe and wonder, which is awakened in this relationship with the living universe? Are we stepping outside of the materialist paradigm? And are we stepping into emergent strategies of belonging, knowing that transformation is messy? It's not neat. These neat little, theory of change boxes, we all know that's not quite the way change happens. So as we go through these processes of developing bridging, of developing belonging, of leaning into the realities of the mycelial network and our interconnectedness, we all understand these are not new concepts. They have been practiced for a long time. We have access to them in our collective DNA and our collective memory. The notion of Ubuntu ties us together, and it ties our freedoms together. I won't read through the slides so that we have more time for conversation, but this is really to appreciate that the great turning, and this is developed by Hajar Tazi, that the great turning says that in terms of mental models, there are many more possibilities presenting of ways in which we can move forward differently. And this notion of us settling for more, of actually being world makers and creating worlds of belonging in which we do wish to live, takes us back to the knowledge that together we have incredible power and ways of co-creating and collaborating for something that is far more beautiful than we can even imagine when we create it together. The person holding up this tile that he made, Settle for More, is my beloved nephew, Geethan Kapoor, who we lost last month, a young queer artist who was seemingly too beautiful for this world. So just for us to remember this queering of concepts, of binaries that look as if they are strong and set. Nothing is fixed, even though the military-industrial complex makes us think it might be. So in keeping with your logo, Paul, and this work that we are doing together, thank you so much, Matthias, and all of you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cathy-Mae. So the floor is now open for conversation. But meanwhile, while anyone wants to grab the first piece, I would like to ask everyone to turn on your cameras so we can take a picture now and not at the end. So while everyone is turning their cameras on, whoever wants to go first, please go ahead. Just raise your hand or unmute yourself. This is open conversation now.
Nice to see you, Grace. Where are you, Nazli? Are you able to? Yes. Got to reach the people in South Africa. Thank you so much. And Sinead and Anna and Everard, thank you so much. If you are able to turn on your cameras, and Tia and Nomazizi.
Yes. But please, while everyone else turns on their cameras, please go ahead and speak whoever wants to. Yes, Mark, please.
Hello, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. I've always got lots to say, and I didn't want to say first because it should always be a woman, or certainly not an old white straight male that speaks first because they take up too much space in the world already. But I'm just overwhelmed by the beauty, the positivity, the vision that's being shared here, and I'm very fortunate to I work in a university teaching community education, so based on the works of Paulo Freire and Bell Hooks and Henry Giroux and all the kind of critical pedagogy, Antonia Darder, etc. I've shared in the chat the gesturing towards decolonial futures and the brilliant work of Vanessa Andreotti. You talked about composting and the kind of hospicing modernity. And I'm very interested in the Club of Rome's work, Paul, around the Earth for All book, which I've used in my teaching and used with a colleague in Portugal. What I think was missing from it was discussion of the military-industrial complex. And it's great. I have printed out that report that you mentioned just yesterday, so I look forward to read it. So I think my question is that what you were saying, Cathy-Mae, about movement building. So that kind of need for the connection on the ground, the networks on the ground, and I'm interested in ways in which we can do that in geographic but also connected ways. So to give you an example, I'm interested in radical municipalism. So that talks about the politics of proximity and the feminization of politics. And it's very much kind of linked into the work that's happening in Rojava over the last 10 years in the Kurdish area of Syria. So interested in the work with that. And the last thing I'll say, I was lucky enough to be part of the Transnational Institute series of they call Fractures. And we had Kalia Kuno from the what they called this. It's work that's got to be going on in the States around creating alternative economies, etc. But just to say that all the things we had a brilliant activist from South Africa talking about creating understandings of our kind of world and environment. So basically, when I speak to people, I talk about colonialism, patriarchy, and capitalism. And often it's the capitalism that people really have a problem with naming. So I'm just interested in how we can kind of center calling out the toxicity of capitalism, patriarchy, and obviously colonialism. Thank you very much. Sorry for the long question.
Thank you, Mark. Before we give Paul and Cathy-Mae the opportunity to answer, I already took a couple of pictures. I'm going to take one more with everyone aware of. Sorry for my baby crying, by the way. So we're going to take it in 3, 2, 1. Thank you. So now, Paul, Cathy-Mae, you're able to answer, please.
Yeah, okay, I'll get it started. It's a very interesting, very important, and also a very complex question to parse out the impacts of these different systems, whether they're capitalism, militarism, consumerism. There are so many of the isms that are part of modernity. It's very difficult to parse out. And I want to begin by acknowledging that I don't think the Club of Rome has a particularly good solution to how to make the world move. Movement is a very important word to me. And I'm realizing that all my professional life, I have not been engaged with movement building. I've been engaged with talking to expertise, talking to policymakers, And the Club of Rome is sort of in that basket of people who talk to important people, so-called important people. But witnessing what has gone on in the last 3 or 4 years, I think the club itself needs to get off that pedestal and start talking to real people, the masses, because change is not going to come from the top. The kind of collective leadership failure that I'm now witnessing, whether it is in Mr. Trump and Modi and Putin and closer to Argentina, Milei, or all of these people. To me, it represents a mammoth failure of what we even consider as leadership. So I don't have that much hope that it's going to come down from the top. And I'm also finding out that I am actually poorly qualified and positioned to help shape a movement. We, as conveners of opinion at the Club of Rome, can do a little bit of convening. And we are trying to move our discussions more and more towards convening movements rather than convening groups of expertise. And I'll give you one example. Last week, we convened a group of 45 organizations that are interested in transforming business education, because they deeply feel that business education is actually not only useless, but actually harmful for the way it is being conducted by the mainstream business schools. And we went in there not knowing who these people are. And then we realized that these are the movers and shakers who, for the last 30 years, have been working on transforming one small piece of the business education ecosystem. And that there was already a movement afoot in their own work to do more movement building. And we came out of that one day of brainstorming with this idea that the biggest resources are here in the room. We need to build these networks or networks of networks. And we need to work together and find the common ground in which we can collaborate around specific ideas. And I suspect that is going to be our approach to movement building, whether it comes to business education or peace or new economics. We are looking for partners who will help us, who will teach us how this movement has to be brought to the level of the masses, people on the ground, and even to our own bodies. And already what I'm hearing today, Cathy-Mae's talk on how we rejigger our relationship to nature, and we need to see the trees and the mountains and the forests and the rivers as our teachers. But we need to open ourselves up in a whole different way. And at the Club of Rome lingo, we call it relearning to be human. Modernity and all our socialization of the past few decades has distorted that to the point of this kind of alienated living that we are doing. So maybe it's not an answer to your question, but at least putting the responsibility back on us as individuals, as friends, as parents, as family members, to try to do this collectively. So thank you for rejiggering our interest in movement building.
And maybe Mark, to you and to others, thank you so much, Paul. You know, the business of movement building, we all know this well. We want to be very careful of what we are centering when we are building movements. And we want to be very careful of giving any more power and voice to neoliberalism, whiteness, capitalism, various forms that these social forces assume today. Many of the successful movements build around shared visions of a dreamed and imagined world. And this is why the young people are so important. And of course, we're meaning intergenerational, right? We're saying we want to bring in all the many wisdoms, but we do want to be sure that we are centering the insights and wisdom of people who are interested in humanity, in awe, in the world, in belonging. You know, we want to be very sure that we are centering these values and these principles as we build. Otherwise, we are in danger of only being reactive or in resistance. Yes, that is all that I would add. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy-Mae and Paul. I would like just to add to what you were saying, that the whole concept, the whole idea of this webinar series, it's I don't know if I would dare to say like start a movement, but at least start strengthening this or enforcing this network of cooperations. We just ended last week the Young Person's Guide to Systems Change Fellowship, and one of the mottos of the main quotes that we try to follow and understand is that there are no magical recipes for any of this. It's not like, okay, so we need to do some movement building and to make peace happen in the territories, so we're going to just snap our fingers and it's going to happen. We need to spend time doing this. We need to get to meet each other, to know each other, to trust each other, because that's what settles the foundations for peace. So the floor is still open for questions, comments, thoughts.
Could we hear from the 7 or 8 organizations that you had mentioned, Matthias, if there's what opportunity they see in collaboration and co-creation of projects, or how can we help them, or where are the intersections that they see? Ali has her hand up.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. I'm not going to venture to answer your question that you just posed. I had a question of my own. I hope that that's okay. It's kind of a comment and also a question. First, thank you both for your presentations. I found them very meaningful. In reflecting on some of your presentation and also just life, I'm thinking about different generations and the word hope, what that means, what we see, I think is the millennial generation, which I'm a part of, experiencing, I think, this collective grief that the future that we thought we would have, that was sold to us, was one built on a lie, but has become increasingly out of touch, this and highly complicated. I can speak for myself. I graduated during the financial crisis, the Iraq war in Afghanistan and Iraq, plagued North America for 20 years, the COVID pandemic. It's kind of been one thing after the other. And this notion of prosperity as we were sold it is just, it's completely out of reach. And then you see Generation Z, who and Generation Alpha, who I see as being more increasingly kind of aloof and alone, and also absent of hope. I also see that this is kind of manifesting in pushing certain groups of people, especially young men, into places where they can kind of connect with really dangerous and toxic ideas in the manosphere, as it's been coined. I know this is a really loaded question. I just wonder how you see hope. How do we inspire hope without being condescending and saying, just ignore that pink elephant in the room, be hopeful, save us. Yeah, just how do you wrestle with those ideas? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ali. And I just want to recall, just before getting on this call, I was on another call, and I might not be paraphrasing it correctly, but there was a quote about hope that somebody mentioned there, and this is apparently from Pope Francis, who just passed away, who said that hope is not something that leads to action. It is action that leads to hope. And so his message was that if we want to be hopeful, it's not just something that can happen in our heads, it's something that we need to create. And that gave me a sort of different perspective on what might be hopeful. But in my thinking about hope, I am convinced that hope is like a design principle. We need to come to it with the idea that we are going to create a different world, and that whatever notion of prosperity we inherited, which might have been based on a lie or on somebody else's truth, now is the opportunity to redefine it and to make it more meaningful, make it more relational, fill it with all those things that are missing from it. And if we can find in our daily activities, in the way we are earning our livelihoods, in the people we are talking to, in the relationships we have, minor adjustments that we could make without too much disruption of our life, perhaps, or in some cases it might mean a big disruption of life. And I know a lot of young people who are completely disrupting the received wisdom about prosperity to redefine what it means to be prosperous for them. And it's not around money, it's not around jobs, it's not around careers, it's around what they are doing, their art, their loved ones, their ability to care for animals or nature, but how they are defining prosperity. And it comes with a sacrifice. It's not free. They are sacrificing traditional definitions of success, but they've come to that place by themselves. And it is so enormously gratifying and uplifting to see lives being created with a different notion of prosperity. And that gives me hope. So I'll stop there, and maybe Cathy-Mae has some more thoughts to offer on that difficult question.
Just a few thoughts, Ali. Thank you so much for that question and for your contribution, Paul. I know we have our beloved Tutu Foundation with us today, and Archbishop Tutu very famously said, "I am a prisoner of hope, not as a glib platitude, but as a way of understanding that actually we are investing in one another. You know, our wealth is actually not measured in financial terms. It is measured in our hearts, the cultivation of courageous leadership. We're busy taking our ambassadors through this incredible program that the Tutu Foundation offers, the courageous leadership, and actually hearing the stories from so many young people of what they are doing to change the landscape of their communities. And so I think when we gather those stories and we join up those dots, suddenly things start shining very differently to the dominant narratives that actually put us down and the conditions that put us down consistently. So this is a matter of where are we focusing our attention? Because where we place our minds and where we focus our attention, that grows. So we want to become really efficient, really careful about this focus on the heart and on one another and on these incredible stories. Matthias, please, may I ask that we take all three questions from Lucy and Janice and Sinead, and then give our community also time to answer. Thank you so much.
I don't know if there are questions or comments, but please, Lucy, you were first. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I guess it's more of a comment. And thank you, Paul, Cathy-Mae, Matthias, for everything that you shared so far. I've just been really kind of thinking about, Paul, you made a comment about kind of the Club of Rome more speaking to more high-level figures, but last year, and I mention this because I'm still so moved by the experience. I attended 2 Club of Rome events, actually. But one in particular was a conference that, so sorry, I'm from the Soka Gakkai International. So Soka Gakkai partnered with Club of Rome and the Fifth Element on a conference in the UK to mark the 40th, you probably are aware of this, the 40th anniversary of SGI President Daisaku Ikeda's dialogue with Club of Rome founder Aurelio Peche 40 years ago. And you know, what came out of that dialogue was really the need for a human revolution or an inner transformation. And what I got from the dialogue was really the perspective that we haven't yet, you know, tapped into the vast potential that humanity possesses. And this was really kind of a call to action for us really to focus on that. And, you know, at the conference, we brought together, you know, incredible youth from around the world, but, you know, people of all ages. And the conference was really focused on deep dialogue on kind of different themes. But I feel like, yeah, there's so much more that we can explore within that. And it kind of left me really hungry for just more of such kind of interactions and encounters, because I'm still, yeah, very touched by it. So I guess maybe more Matthias and Anna Sophia, because we were there together, could we maybe have a like year celebration of that and see what we can really build on that momentum that we started together last year? Yeah, maybe just some thoughts for now.
Thank you, Lucian. It's definitely something worth thinking of. So let's move into it. So then, if following Cathy-Mae's request, I don't know who you are that has the red hand. Raise your name because it says just Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation. Sorry.
Sorry, Janet here. Hi everyone, Janet Jobson from the Tutu Legacy Foundation. I couldn't figure out how to change my name on the screen. I was sparked by Ali's questions about hope, and as you say, Cathy-Mae, this profound idea of being a prisoner of hope is one that the Arch really stood for. But he also, something that often speaks to me is he spoke about hope as something very gritty and very real. And he spoke in some ways about cynicism being the easy option because it doesn't risk anything. Hope is risky and it can break your heart. Your heart can be broken. And so there's something really profoundly adventurous and risk-taking and powerful and gritty about hope that that certainly comes through in the way Desmond Tutu speaks about it. It's inspired for us at the Tutu Legacy Foundation the beginnings of an exploration of what a global hope report might look like. How might we begin to generate and capture and create spaces where hope is really fueled by each other. In a lot of our work, we wouldn't call it movement building, but what we try to build are what we call circles of courage. So networks, connections, conversations where people can draw on each other, having walked through deep dialogue and walked through the conversations that are needed to transform things, to then rely on each other in the hard times and in the difficulties of continuing this work. It was also so wonderful just seeing on the chat all of the various links being sent. We're just in the process of wrapping up some work trying to explore the question of collective and societal healing. So a lot of our work at the foundation is framed around the idea that Archbishop Tutu's legacy is one of healing societies. And we think of that often as requiring three kinds of work to happen. The work of reconciliation, which is about truth-telling. It's about telling the stories of harm. It's about naming the wounds. And it's about continually trying to find each other across divides. The very important work of repair, which is really the tackling of injustice and discrimination. And then, which connects quite nicely, is this work of reimagining who we can be, reimagining how we can be as societies. And in that space, we've been exploring how we can draw from indigenous wisdom and sort of the more than human, from spiritual and faith traditions, and from psychology, and finding the conversation between those types of work to really explore how we do self-repair for societal repair, or maybe for planetary repair. So yeah, maybe just a comment saying I'm loving the intersections of all of the works, and it's beautiful to be in conversation with all of you. Thanks, Mati.
Thank you, Janet. And sorry for for security reasons, I often turn off the possibility of changing names. But now you're able if you want to. Sina, you have your hand raised too.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Paul and Cathy-Mae, for all the inspiration. And I was just thinking about this whole notion of creating a new vision of peace. And I'm not representing an organization, but I'm an independent scholar in the strategic use of the arts, mainly music, in peace building. And this started to really, we started to really see this emerge in the 1990s during what was happening in Northern Ireland and South Africa on a grassroots level. So through theatre and a lot of projects with and run by young people from different sides of conflict. I think in terms, it kind of hits so many of the points that we were talking about in terms of belonging, building a new narrative, creating new communities as well. Creativity is absolutely essential. And if we believe that we're living as part of nature, we are going to be constantly creating instead of consuming. So yeah, I think this is, without going into too much detail, I think it's a really important daily practice that all of us need to consider, and also in collaboration with each other. And I think one of the greatest challenges to that at the moment is the nervous system disruption that we're all experiencing through the big and small traumas of what is happening in the world, and simply how people treat each other on a one-to-one level, not knowing how to process their own trauma. And that is something that can be very disruptive to creating a new story for ourselves. We can get stuck in these iterative cycles of doom, really, and thinking that we're powerless. And I think that the way that social media is being used, maybe especially by a lot of young people who don't realize yet the damage that it's doing, adds to that nervous system stress. So on the other side of things, when we're constantly using our creativity, coming up with a new vision, coming up with a new story for our own lives and for our communities, that's where things really start to shift on a cellular level, and that intimate level, and on the collective level. So I think it's something, and Cathy-Mae, you mentioned returning to indigeneity. Just to give an example from my own culture, the beautiful Gaelic culture, for hundreds and hundreds of years, even after the nation that colonized us literally banned our language, banned our music, banned our indigenous dance form and all of this, we brought it underneath the ground to the head schools. But the way that my ancestors have used particularly music to alchemize the trauma and the suffering of hundreds of years of colonization and loss is a really good example of how returning to our ancestral cultures can inspire and revitalize, I think.
Thank you very much, Sina. We're pretty much on time, so I would ask both Paul and Cathy-Mae if besides you answering to the people who have spoken, you could also kind of give a little bit of some closure ideas, would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if it is possible to give closure to all the openings that have come through over here. I won't pretend that I'm answering that, but I do want to leave everyone with this feeling that one thing that we could do in this chaos that Sinead and Ali and Lucy and others have mentioned is to build our own little islands of coherence. It's a very chaotic world, and there's too much noise, and sense making has been identified formally as something that the Club of Rome should focus its attention to in a chaotic world where global order is breaking down, global economy is being rejiggered and completely changed. And we are asking these fundamental questions of what it means to be human, and we're not going to find one answer. So can we at least identify a few people, some on this call and others in our lives, with whom we can together build these islands of coherence? I'm not talking about enclosing ourselves into our own private bubbles, but in terms of shaping our relationships with people in deeper ways so that we can meaningfully move towards at least some of the goals that we want to pursue in life. I think that is one possibility moving forward. And in the context of hope, the way we are doing it at the Club of Rome is we've created this program called Education for Hope, wherein within the education community, which, as you know, is vast and spans our lives from grade school to higher education and colleges, we are building these small islands of coherence around. There's one in South Africa that John Gilmore and Mamfela and some others are co-leading on educating children in the villages. There's another one in Afghanistan that Marilyn Gordiner, who's another member of the Club of Rome, is focusing on to bring modern thinking to women and girls, particularly young girls. And this project has been going on for over 20 years, but bringing them again towards hope. And then the other piece of education I mentioned was in business schools, which are seeking to transform managers who are going to manage the future of the economy. And each of these examples is not a solution in itself, but it is built around deep commitments of individuals. And we think that that could be one way of moving this discourse forward. We could do it in the peace area. Many of you are already pursuing peace in your own organizations. And I hope you can bring us to your island as we bring you closer to ours. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Paul and Matthias. And I want to thank also everyone for these incredible contributions that show us just how much interconnection there already is. And that these impact networks, these global networks that we're speaking about, the seeds are ever present, and so many of them already here, and there are many multiple more that are not present. I want to speak about just two additional things that recently I was doing some systems change and deep mental model shifts with a board, a group of people, and we used Margaret Wheatley's Willing to be Disturbed, a 2-page document, but that invites our deep curiosity and that reminds us when we are feeling too comfortable, nothing is really changing. And so this opening ourselves up to being the change, opening ourselves up to being different in this world, to practicing liberation on a daily basis, finding out what that means for us, what that means for our community, appreciating that the practice of the heart is really also the practice of being able to tap insight and wisdom It's the practice of kindness and compassion, yes, but these open up our abilities to tap insight and wisdom. There is so much power that we are sitting upon, and it doesn't have to become an extractive industry. The more insightful and wise we become, the more it generates this in kind. So I think all of our collaborations that are leaning into the spiritual and the sacred, you know, if those words can become part of our vocabulary, or maybe we want to speak about love, when we bring this into our practice, many other things become part of our imagining new worlds. Thank you so much, people. I hope that that is all okay to say, and wonderful to be in all your fine company. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cathy-Mae and Paul, for such a wonderful time shared together. And thank you, everyone who attended here today.